good afternoon, everybody. This is Dr. John Michael Salvato, and you're watching The Brew, a television and internet talk show that was created by and for the LGBTQ Pagan community. My co-host today, Raphael Ray of Radiant Reality, is not able to be with us, and I've just gotten out of the hospital, so this will probably be a somewhat brief episode. I apologize in advance, but wanted to make sure that we touched base with you guys, and I want to say hello to everybody who's tuning in for the first time, as well as those who are back with us. The topic that we had planned for today's installment is looking at the possibilities of finding sort of a way forward from the witch wars and the conflicts that exist within our community, the infighting between us. Dostoevsky wrote in the Brothers Karamazov, since man can't live without miracles, he will provide himself with miracles of his own making. He will believe in witchcraft and sorcery, even though he may otherwise be an heretic, an atheist, and a rebel. And so on today's show, we want to explore the possibilities that this insight might give us into the challenges that we're facing as a community in the community of LGBTQ pagans. And I'm going to talk about this more over the weekend in a special installment of the Inner Alchemy program, where we have a full presentation on a little bit of the history that I think brought this challenge has arisen from. And so I encourage you guys to tune in on Saturday at 3 o'clock Eastern time. That is 8 o'clock in the evening Greenwich Mean Time. And hello, Richard, and everyone who's joining us now. I'm seeing folks jump in a little bit more quickly than I'm able to catch them when they come in here. We're glad you guys are here, and so today I'm glad to see some of the faces that I'm seeing pop up on the console here, because I think you guys can add a lot to this discussion. You know, we're in a period, I think, in which technology is allowing us to sort of flesh out some of these things that maybe cause the divisions that we see in our community. And so, you know, with a lot of it, some articles were posted, and I apologize that because I'm just getting out of the hospital. I don't, first of all, I apologize for this hair. That was not done intentionally, but I'm not able to shower and get this surgical site wet for another 24 hours. So what you see is what you get there. You know, I want to acknowledge that there's been some really great articles posted in some of the online journals, and I apologize that I don't remember which journals they were. I think that maybe a few of you can help us there on posting some of those links after, either before or after the show, or I'll try and look them up afterwards. But they were looking at topics like the fact that witchcraft should mean something. Some of them, others were looking at where our terms come from and the labels come from, and I couldn't help but notice that in these articles that are really well written, very insightful. A lot of times I think that from my perspective, what's happening is that we're using labels out of a want and a need to define something. But you've got sort of this dichotomy in our community as a whole, where there are some people who feel that they couldn't have a valid path if it were not directly tied to something more ancient. There are others who are willing to say, hey, my spiritual path is something that was part of a restoration movement in the 14th or 15th centuries. Others who say, my path is my path, and it's personal, and it doesn't require validation or links to the past in any way, shape, or form. And so when you've got those sort of conflicts in the in the vocabulary that we use to describe our path, to describe us as practitioners. There's going to be some, I think, some friction. And friction's not always a bad thing. I think, without friction, the grain of sand doesn't become the pearl, to quote an ancient wisdom package or ancient wisdom tradition. But when we package those things too tightly, then we lose the ability to learn from the stories, from the mythos, from when we take them too seriously, we lose the ability to learn from that mythos. And these spiritual paths are nothing if not sort of an opportunity for us to explore our own metaphors, our own sacred stories, our own personal stories. And really, if the purpose of that is not to come back to a place where we are individually empowered and then can support one another through our own empowerment, then I think this whole concept of calling ourselves a community or saying that this is our spiritual tradition is pointless. We are first and foremost, I think, trying to come to terms with greater control over, mastery over, however you want to put it, of our own minds, of our own circumstances and our own journeys. And I'm looking at some of the comments here, and yeah, Richard Levy says, I'm going to go ahead and try and put this up on the screen. In magic vocabulary, it is an issue, but I think no words should define, only describe, and we need to work on communication. Yeah, absolutely. Another part of that is he often says, I love this, take magic seriously, but not yourself. And yeah, that's spot on. I think that it's too easy to get caught up in what we call ourselves, what tradition we align ourselves with. It's really frustrating. Bless you. It's really frustrating that to see folks who come into these communities really only looking for either an ego stroke or looking for attention, they're looking for counselors, as we heard our guest on the show, Nico, last week and the week before, say that, some of these people are just out there looking for the attention they're not getting elsewhere. Others are looking for a way to sort of rail against the system and just to kind of be countercultural. And I think that again, that sort of misses the point of what this practice is. Still, others certainly are connected to this path because in the 14th and 15th century, some of the Reconstructionists decided to turn it into a religion. And we're going to talk about all of that over the weekend in greater detail. But I'd love to hear from you guys on some of what, like if you've read those articles, especially I know a few of you have, where it says, witchcraft should mean something. Nowadays, it seems like anyone can slap the label on anything that they're doing and almost use witchcraft as an excuse for bad behavior, to use witchcraft as an excuse for antisocial behavior. And just in today's news, we saw what to me feels like the beginning of the 21st century witch hunt, where certain conservative press was saying that Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is a witch, with no basis for that. And while she may very well be a bruja, based on her on the area that she grew up in, I think that would be awesome. I would love that. But if there's no basis for making that statement, then it's the same exact thing that we saw happen in Salem. It's the same exact thing that we saw the loyalists to King James I do in response to the ridiculous texts that were being written in those times, in which people who were being burned at the stake, many, if not most of them, were simply people that were having fingers pointed at them who had never practiced magic or witchcraft or anything in their lives. Some have suggested that some of that was done intentionally by the community of witches to sort of teach them a lesson. Others, clearly have documented that these were just attack tactics, like we saw today in the press, where AOC is getting attacked and being called a witch because they think that's a pejorative statement. Another post that I saw today was somebody attacking the owner of a shop, of an esoteric shop, for carrying poppets and referring to them as voodoo dolls, carrying. There was something else that they carry there, and they statues of Baphomet, and and saying that's that they're evil and that therefore they're somehow satanic or whatever. I when I read these things, that's when it comes to me that the Dostoevsky quote is like really clear to me, is that for those who are trying to find a sense of empowerment, who are trying to find a sense of personal mastery, many times that leads us to believe in things like witchcraft and sorcery, but not necessarily to tap into the actual traditions themselves. So I think online, this was when I was reading that this past couple days in the hospital, it really struck me that some of the people that I'm thinking are posers and that are just looking for attention might be those people who feel in their own lives they can't live without miracles, and so they're going to attach themselves to something like witchcraft or sorcery, or however you want to define that path, without having any real connections to that. And so this weekend I'm going to try and do a program where we talk about some of the challenges historically and anthropologically, and I know for some folks that's a sore subject. They don't like anthropology or science to be brought into discussions of our spiritual paths, but for others of us, our spiritual paths are science. Our spiritual paths are the anthropology, understanding the history and the reasons for our cultures and our societies, our ancestors, to take the path that they've taken. I again want to apologize. My voice is starting to fade. I'm feeling really weak, so I'm not going to go very long today. But I want to acknowledge some of the other comments. And first of all, Carrie, thank you so much. Carrie says I look great. It's really hard to keep a good bitch or a good witch down. So I am certainly grateful that I'm up and at least sitting at the desk for a little while today. But it is getting a little tiring. Richard brings up another point, and Richard, I really can't wait to have you on the show one of these weeks. Had I realized that you were available today, I would have tried at short notice to get you on. But Richard says, and I don't know if this will fit on the screen. Let's give it a shot. It does. He says, witchcraft as a power always exists, as does various forms of magic, but traditions that surround it, like all traditions, are a product of their time. When rebellion is needed, that's what we get. When secrecy is applied, it's what's needed at that time. And when loud voices are needed, those traditions arise, all warming themselves around the flame of witchcraft. Very, very aptly put. I'm going to leave that up for just a couple of seconds here, so that if somebody wants to pause their screen on the replay, they can see that, because that is one of those quotes that I think needs to be on a meme or in a book, Richard. So I thank you for that. Would love to hear from you guys. It certainly will help us to sort of not to achieve a consensus, but to have new things like Richard just shared to think about. When rebellion's needed, that's what we get. When lines in the sand need to be drawn, that's an interesting perspective. For me, I've always sort of railed against that and said, why are you drawing lines in the sand? Why get hung up about the labels? Call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. And for me, that includes the ones who we might honestly look at and think that they're posers. The people who come online and say, oh, well, you know, I have a power over people, and when I walk in a room, if I'm happy, I make them happy. If I walk in a room and I'm sad, I make them sad. We can easily look at that and say that's utter and complete bullshit. Somebody looking for attention, somebody looking to, you know, to make themselves look better. But it's in reality, if that's the path, if that's what they choose to call their path, that's just a label, and they have the right to do that. None of us has a right to say, well, you're not really a witch, you're not really a pagan, you're not really a Christian, you're not really a whatever, because we don't have the right to define that, in my opinion. Now, there are some who I think, you know, some of you watching might think that we do have the right to define that. But if we do that, then I think that we're falling into that trap of turning the ancient unnamed path into a religion. And that's why I'm not involved in any of the witchcraft oriented religions. That's why I'm not involved in any religion whatsoever, because I found that untenable in my own personal journey, to attach myself to something that's dogmatic, something that has rules written in sand. And so for me, there are connections that in my own personal spiritual path that draw deeply on the traditions of my ancestors in Stregaria, in you know, the magic traditions, in witchcraft. But there are also I draw deeply from the well of contemplative spirituality. I draw deeply from the well of sort of the Franciscan esoteric practice and the Buddhist esoteric practice, because for me, the journey itself is what matters, not what we call it. You know, it's what I do to empower myself to make a difference in the world. Because empowering myself to go on Facebook and say, oh, I have this psychic gift and I can walk into a room and make people happy, is not only bullshit, but it serves no purpose. You know, I work on myself because it empowers me to be able to go out in the streets and do the things that I can do for those to, in some small way, alleviate their suffering. If only to just work on myself and release that chaotic data that results in my perceptions that create suffering, whether on a subtle, very, you know, energetic, subtle level, or in reality. To make me more aware that when I'm jumping off the interstate and I pass by that person who's huddled underneath the bridge, to think, hey, you know, we've got some extra blankets in the back of the car for this purpose. Let's make sure that person has something to stay warm. Let's make sure they know where the mission is, or where the homeless shelter is. You know, those are small things, and they're not glamorous things, and they're not things that we talk about on social media, you know, that draw the attention of pop culture. But they're the things that for me really matter. And I can only come on this show and share with you guys what matters for me. And that's why I appreciate when you guys share what matters for you. And for all of those who are popping in, my brother Harry Coverston, Father Harry, and Cleveland Goodshield, and who are saying, you know, good to see you, and glad you're up and at it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your thoughts and warm wishes, and all of the energy that you guys have sent my way. You know, this was a little bit of a surprise to end up in the hospital, but not a great surprise. The congestive heart failure is something I've been working with and working on for a while now, and they just decided that they needed to do the surgical procedure to make sure that no more stents were needed, and it was, you know, minor surgery, so everything is good. Cleveland writes, dude, let me see, this should fit on the screen. Do I always have to practice witchcraft all the time just to prove to others that I'm a witch? No, I just do me. Life is too short to be caught up in these things. That's why I focus on balance. Yeah, absolutely, brother. You know, nobody should be trying to dictate to you what your spiritual path is. And for those who, I want to be really clear, because I'm mindful of the fact that I've expressed my disdain for witchcraft as a religion, and for religion in general. that doesn't mean by any means that I have disdain for those who decide to make their spiritual path a path that is a religious path. By no means do I mean to show any disdain for the persons who decide that that's what works for them. Because there were periods of time in my own life when I sincerely gave my all to try and follow that path. It's certainly a valid option. It's just not a valid option for me at this point any longer. Richard Levy writes, small things matter the most. It's simply service. If you want to work with land beings, go out and pick up trash. Show that you're willing to be of service and not just petty rituals. And yeah, absolutely. It's what is your spiritual path mean for you? What is it? How does it express itself? In Buddhism, we would say when you're off the mat. How does your spirituality express itself when you're not doing ritual or sitting? To me, that spiritual tradition should be expressing itself in everything you do. Someone should be able to look at the works that you do in the world that you don't have to talk about, that you don't have to put on display on your social media accounts or work into every conversation. And they should say, that person is a good person, or they should want to be around you because what you're doing is you're returning to the present moment, you're returning to your true nature, which is love itself. And that's attractive. If not, then I would challenge you to look deeply at your practice and find for yourself what you're striving for. Are you part of the pagan tradition because it's an opportunity to connect with people that you might not have felt that you had before? Are you part of that tradition because you're seeking and you don't really know what you're seeking for, or maybe that seemed like the most inclusive tradition? Or are you somebody who likes to just rail against society, and so for you this feels like it's that other, it's that opposition to the status quo? Really, I challenge you to really find what that is, because then you can walk that walk more faithfully, more authentically. But for those who are doing this because their objective is to gain greater control of the mind, to bring back their awareness to the present moment, to realize that's where their power is. You're the people that this program was really designed for, because we're here to sort of be of service and be of support to you guys, to give you a voice, even if it's only for 30 minutes once a week, to give you an opportunity to ask questions, to challenge yourself, to challenge one another, and to come together. And, in the past, I've gotten a lot of messages in the last couple of weeks about some of our previous co-hosts and folks who have expressed everything from concern to disdain to everything in between about where some of those folks were a little bit confrontational, they were a little bit judgmental, and while I don't disagree that wasn't an acceptable way to treat one another on this program, it's also really important to understand that's what we're talking about today, is that there are some folks who are just trying to find validation on their spiritual path. And if there's not someone in that tradition to support them, to guide them, to sort of nurture them, it's really easy to fall into that path, I find, of judging others and sort of becoming dogmatic yourself. And because what's happening is when somebody expresses their disdain, as we saw in one of the shows, for the people who charge for doing card readings, or who charge for doing astrological charts or whatever, the person who was expressing that disdain was actually expressing that disdain for themselves. They were talking about their own path without realizing it, and trying to flesh out the challenges within over whether they could support themselves as a pagan practitioner, or whether they needed to have a second job. Neither of which was the case in that particular situation. So I really want to challenge you guys to bring compassion back to that moment, let it go, and sort of just, you know, love and bless and hold the people that might have seemed in opposition to us in our hearts, because I don't really believe that opposition was their objective. And Cleveland writes, nobody's perfect, even me, I'm not perfect, but again, it doesn't give validation to say who's right or who's wrong. I had a mental breakdown on Facebook, so I had to leave for my well-being and to clear my aura, emotional state, and state of mind. And yeah, I agree, and we hold you in our hearts as well, brother. And there are times you have to unplug. There are times that you have to just say, okay, I need to distance myself from this toxic situation and take a mental health day or a mental health week or a mental health month, whatever it takes. You know, just know that this community is here to support you on your journey. This community is here to love and affirm your path, and to recognize that your path is your path and nothing else. So, you know, on last night was the beginning of that big supermoon, and as I've said on several programs in the past, you know, the moon's an opportunity for us to remember that no matter what phase we're in, we're still whole. You don't have to see the moon in the sky for it to still be there in the middle of daytime here on the East Coast of North America. The moon is still there. We might not see it, but it is still there. And so at times when things feel really a mess, that wholeness that you truly are is still there. That pure awareness, that love, is your true nature, and it is always there. And there are always reflections of your love, which is what each one of us are, that can be there for you when you need someone to lean on. So I thank you guys for being there for me, for being those reflections and reminders of my true nature when I was in the hospital and when things were a little rough for the last few days. I want to thank each and every one of you, because I truly am grateful for those reflections, incredible reflections of the love that is my true nature. That really goes a long way to helping an individual on their healing path. And that's why there was no way I was going to miss being with you guys for at least 20 or 30 minutes today. I apologize again for the weakness of my voice. I apologize. I apologize most of all for this hair. I look like a combination of a troll doll and Bob's Big Boy. Melinda, hey, it's great to see you. But I just wanted to stop in and just let you guys know that I love you and encourage you to be on here on Saturday at 3 o'clock Eastern time, or you can watch the rebroadcast as we sort of unpack the history of the esoteric tradition, and maybe some of the reasons that these lines in the sand have been drawn, and hopefully begin to heal some of those divisions within our community. And then from there, I think we'll be better empowered, better able to heal some of those divisions within the world. And so thanks for being here. As I say at the end of every one of our programs, my sincere hope for you is that you make the decision right now, today, to stay in the moment, because that's where the power is. To be grateful for the things that you've got already, because if you can't be grateful for what you have, there's no reason to think you're going to be any happier with more. And to always remember, the best is yet to come. And I love you. We'll talk to you soon, guys. Namaste.